The divine revelation Alpha and Omega is a colossal telepathic scripture, embodied in 10,000 telepathic scrolls or planes, 1.20 m high by 0.80 m wide, around the world, 4,000 of which are located in Lince, Lima, Peru. This work was done through the divine universal living telepathy, between the Divine Father, Jehovah, who is in the kingdom of heaven, and his divine solar firstborn Son Christ, who is already incarnated as a human being on this planet of relative trials. Learn more in www.alphaomega.com.pe. The Divine Measuring Rod, continuation, the principle of a divine justice promised in the kingdom of heaven, saved are the humbles in heart, the living humility. Yes, my son, we will continue with the divine measuring rod issue. I will tell you, dear son, that it intervenes in all the acts of life, in the spiritual and the material field, for all the thinking moments, for the ideas that are not expressed, but they are deep in the mind. Each act lived is divided by 10, from this total thinking 10, half corresponds to the spirit and half to those around the spirit. It is a constantly evolving half, because human thoughts are varied and infinite. Here is the divine psychology of the divine commandments, half for you and half for me, and the spirit is not run over in any degree. It was written, do not do to others what you would not want others to do to you. To exceed half within a calculation is to inflict an offense on free will. All spirits are born with the same rights, they carry within their own germ of solar origin, the justice they witnessed in their state of innocence. Spiritual intuition imperfectly encompass that justice. Justice possess individuality, according to the evolution of each spirit, each one tries to impose his own, even in those of backward thoughts. The divine measuring rod possesses justice for all generations of the planet, because each human creature came out of the same point, all came out of the Alpha and Omega sons of the Trino galaxy. They all carry the same inheritance, even if they express themselves with different individualities. This infinite range of different ways of thinking makes certain demons take advantage. They think they see in others a certain weakness. These arrogant spirits believe they were born to reign over others. It's okay to lead, but it is wrong to run over my divine commandments. It would be better for the spirit not to lead, since every act that was done in an instant endures for all eternity. It was written that everyone makes their own heaven. I meant, each one with his own acts makes his own eternity, according to how each one's acts were. It is the physical form of his own body, and at the same time, it shapes its own future planet. Therefore, there is no act, however microscopic, that does not constitute a future world, and there is no world that has not come out of a microscopic act. It was written, you have to be quite small and humble, to be great in the kingdom of heaven. It means, you have to be as microscopic as an idea is, that it is just felt and not seen, and there is no act that first was not a simple idea. The microscopic idea is the Alpha and the Omega of all truth. The first truth is the Father, from him all the others have come out, from him have come out infinite and divine measuring rods. Exist and existed as many measuring rods, as there were worlds and there will be, for it was written, no one is disinherited, everyone has the same rights, both above and below. The divine measuring rod acts according to how the spirits acted. It requests neither more nor less, acts to the extent of how everyone was ordered to act in life, with the greatest moral power that are the divine commandments. Every word from God is living, because of his divine words, the universes were born, and there is no universe that has not known his word. Each world, both above and below, has its sacred scriptures, whose psychology is according to its evolution. Nobody evolves if it is not by the living word of God. There is no world nor will exist, which is marginalized from this universal law. All fulfill microscopic acts, even the molecules of the planets perform acts that go unnoticed by spiritual creatures. The molecules also have their divine measuring rods, they also promised the Divine Father to fulfill his laws. It was written that the universe of the Divine Father Jehovah is a living universe. Matter and spirit have life, nobody is less before the Father. Matter and spirit have the same rights, within its own laws and manifestations. To possess one quality is to have a mandate, to possess an amount. It is also, the quality is eternal and the quantity is temporary. Quantity is possessed while living, and quality is possessed when one enters eternity. The amount commits you, the Quality eternalizes you, the quantity remains on earth, it becomes dust, passes along with the earth, more the acts performed build the quality. From the quality the spiritual hierarchy is born, which is the degree of galactic power achieved by the creature. The greater the galactic power, the more infinite it is in his creations, more superior is heaven one. There are so many skies, as X each one has done in life, neither number nor mathematics count in the creation of the Divine Father. The heavens exist of all eternity, and all were born of microscopic acts performed by creatures of very remote galactic antiquity, so aged they are, that the current suns were not yet born. From those very remote creatures, infinite solar firstborns were born, each with infinite philosophies. Among them is the solar firstborn Sun Christ, that a microscopic planet called Earth met him, and as he brought a doctrine too revolutionary for a barbarian era, he was killed. Even more, he let himself be killed to establish a divine law, that one returns again to the life of the planets. This divine law of the solar parents is normal in distant galaxies. In these worlds there, creatures enter and leave infinite dimensions. It is hard for the human spirit to believe this, for many reasons. The first is that its evolution is microscopic, the second that has a forgetfulness of its own past, for the philosophy chosen by human spirits is a philosophy of test. It is a philosophy that brings with itself a final judgment. Not all philosophies of the universe have final judgment. It takes all sorts to make a world. The final judgments are more common in the worlds of the flesh, to which the earth belongs. Final judgments are necessary for imperfect worlds, that they are beginning to know a certain form of certain matter. Later on, future generations will not have the prejudices of current ones, they will have taken another step into perfection, and many of those future creatures are the current human spirits. One is born and then go back, one dies and then returns. It all is because of the act itself. Every human act has time, space, and philosophy. This is in the spiritual affair, but in the material affair it is quantity, weight, and philosophy. The common denominator of all human thinking is philosophy. Without philosophy no spirit would ask to try a certain form of life on some planet. Even the Divine Father makes use of his divine philosophy. He is the creator of them, and among all of them, he chooses the one that best suits the interests of the universe. When the Divine Father chooses some divine philosophy, he does so by observing the infinite. It was written that God is everywhere, he observes everything, both above and below. He sees all the scenes in all the worlds, he is within the same ideas of thinking beings, whatever the philosophy of each one of them. So it was that when he said, "Let there be light," and there was light, infinite suns arose from infinite points of the universe, even from the same darkness. The suns created and still create tiny microscopic sparks, from which the colossal planets are born. Solar matter has matter and spirit, and everything is in an unheard calorie. The descent of this calorie through time causes life to be born, and it could not be another way, for the Divine Father is fire, and there is no fire that has no calorie. The calorie is the daughter of fire. Materialized calorie will give rise to another fire. This means that all thinking beings go to become suns. The human mind is a small fire, it is a microscopic sun of phosphorus. This is known by scholars of the human mind. They know it from the physical point of view, for everyone is given knowledge, as far as they should know. Everyone has a forgetfulness that they must fulfill. Leaving human life, the spirit remembers all its past, and even he visit the divine place, where his creation was conceived. Only tyrant and proud spirits are not allowed to return to the point where they came from. These spirits continue to be born in worlds of the flesh, they follow their mundane philosophy. The earthly children must not forget that a second celestial is equivalent to a terrestrial century. The centuries do not feel in the kingdom of heaven, because they are unknown. This unity of the earth is a living unit of time, typical from a microscopic planet, called Earth, which is almost unknown in the macrocosm, but it is known that the universe is populated by microscopic planets, known in the kingdom of heaven as dust planets. It was written, "From dust you are and to dust you will return." It means, from microscopic you are and to microscopic you will return, and everything colossal that exists in the kingdom of heaven was also microscopic. They were also tiny monkeys of the worlds of flesh. They were also earthly on planets Earth that is no longer there. And there will come a moment in the galactic future, that the earth you inhabit will be remembered as a planet that existed, will be named in other worlds, it will be mentioned in other writings, for example of new spirits, who begin to live a new philosophy in their eternities. One is born only once in the suns, and one is born infinitely on infinite planets. This universal birth has no limit. The more is born, the greater the wisdom acquires a spirit, and the less is born the less a spirit knows. Behold, the divine origin of the genius spirits. They are geniuses because they know more, they have known more sciences in distant worlds, they come to the life, better specialized than the rest of the spirits, who have lived less. That is why every genius must be humble, because nothing exceptional has before the divine law, only enforced, in himself, the universal law of evolution. His steps as a genius are followed by all the creatures of the universe. Even more, when he arrives at the kingdom of heaven, he sees with surprise that as a genius, nothing is, only his genius shone where there was ignorance, for in the kingdom of heaven, all are geniuses of eternity, and he realizes that being a genius is like being a somewhat advanced microbe. In the kingdom of heaven, divine wisdom rivals, and in this divine rivalry, colossal worlds are born, infinite galaxies, apart from those created by the Divine Father, which is unsurpassed. Everyone tries to emulate him, more since exists universes, he has never been surpassed. It is this divine rivalry that creates stepped perfection, and which each one follows with knowledge of cause. Each one has a free will, independent of the others. When asking for a philosophy of life on some planet, the spirit asks to try a new destiny, and everything is granted, all are taken care of, life is granted and moral accounts are requested. The Creator gives and takes away life, as it gives and takes away worlds. The same morality is demanded on all planets, within its own laws, and the supreme of morals are those taught by the divine commandments, for in them the free will of the Divine Father is reflected. To please the Divine Father above all things, is to live his purest and sublime moral. The supreme moral of the Father resides in daily work. All work fulfills my divine commandment. You will earn your bread by the sweat of your brow. It does not exist, nor will there be greater morals than this. In all the seconds of work done, there is the biggest prize. It is easier to enter the kingdom of heaven, a worker than a rich or a comfortable one. Poor of those who say they are neutral, independent, and all terminology that my divine commandments do not teach, because all comfortableness is weighed by the divine scales and measured by the divine rod. Everyone who moves away from every human problem loses an infinite number of heavens. All the elapsed seconds are summed to him, from the moment he was indifferent to common problems. Poor comfortable spirits, that you cover yourself with a deceptive philosophy, but you are not ashamed to enjoy what others have earned. Poor spirits of the so-called armed forces, you were warned in the kingdom of heaven, you will be the first to curse your uniforms. You will be the first to curse the damn weapons. Poor you, exploitative materialism. Your damn reign is over. Poor of those who invented the damn money. You asked for such a philosophy in the kingdom of heaven, and it was granted to you. You yourselves insisted, even though you were told that you would be judged. You tried again a philosophy of darkness. There is no time that is not fulfilled, nor compliance that is not judged. How will you curse the inheritance received from your parents? It was written that you would live the weeping and gnashing of teeth, more than any, because your sins exceeded the divine measuring rod. You are no longer satisfied to explode. Now you kill before the face of the world. You kill innocent children, and poor of you United Nations. Demons insensitive to the pain of my children, you will not wear the divine symbol, a silver lamb in your chest, because you all have a guilty conscience. You are only interested in social position and money. You know well, cursed ones, that the damn beast is destroying a defenseless nation, and what do you do for those humbles? You let time pass. I tell you more, how the number of seconds elapsed in the time of indifference will weigh on you. Poor of those who dare to speak to you, cursed ones. Because over such ones the law of the curse will also fall. So it is and so it will be until the consummation of the centuries. Yes, dear son, I know that you are absorbed listening to such commands. That is how they pay it, dear son, those who depart from my divine commandments. And I assure you, dear son, that from this damn organization, there will be no stone left on stone, and just remembering it will shiver the scholars of the future. It was written that no one can serve two masters, either my divine commandments are served, or gold is served. these demons who claim to defend the so-called human rights, only defend the interests of the beast, because their consciences are bought with the damn gold of human exploitation. That is the cause, my son, why these demons do not help that nation called Vietnam, but I assure you, dear son, that no one will escape. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword, without prejudice to divine repentance. Yes, dear son, I have read your mind. That's right, everyone who, being guilty within human laws, but eluded it, by buying consciences with his money, the punishment will triple before the divine law. All justice, even the earthly one, touches very closely the free will of the divine Father. And poor of those judges who did not defend my humble children. All justice was written for them. It was written, the humble are the first. It means that the humble should have ruled the world, and if they have not done so, it is because the demons of ambition came out on their way. These demons promised in the kingdom of heaven, not to be dominated by this weakness. They had already done it in other worlds. And when they came to earth together with the other spirits, they were given a new opportunity. Their mission was to overcome their own ambitious inclinations. Nobody asks them to be ambitious. From their scarce evolved spirits it's born. And be assured, dear son, that if the world had been ruled by the humble, the world would not know war. Every war is caused by ambitious spirits, and every war is disguised by a patriotism. It is a false one that takes centuries and centuries. Materialism wanted it that way, and as they wanted it, so they will be judged. No demon who asked for test of ambition will escape, whatever the category, from the damn pharaohs to the last rich one. Every philosophy has its time, everything is fulfilled as it was written, and all its actors disappear from the scene of life. Divine reality destroys the false, the ephemeral, what is from below, because all are judged by the laws of above. From above they came out, and above they go back. I will tell you, dear son, that the divine measuring rod will cause fright among the demons of ambition, more, not among the suffering children of exploitation. They owe nothing, it's the opposite, they are owed to them, and everything will be restored to them, even the last gram of gold, which does not belong to the beast, will be delivered to them. All wealth earned easily must be handed over, every effort and sweat of brow belongs to the spirit, cannot be removed, and it is the only thing that counts for the salvation of the soul. Every spirit that chose the easy way does not enter the kingdom of heaven. Every rich man is rich by human law, it is not by divine law. If it were by divine law, there would be no measuring rod to take away what is illegal. Every divine measuring rod take away what was achieved in temporary law. Because of the demons of ambition, the divine rod of justice was created. It is not necessary for the kingdom of heaven, because the rich ones are unknown there. In all eternity they have been unknown. One or another solar father who have been prophets on earth, they know it, and they tell the story to the new spirits, to the spirits that are still in a state of solar innocence, who have not yet asked to prove life on distant planets. The teaching and laws that lead to the path of truth are taught both above and below. False stories, such as those on earth, are told in the kingdom of heaven, as stories from demons. Every living world is analyzed, every story is written in the divine solar books, also called books of planetary lives. There are as many planetary stories as there are dwellings in the universe, stories that there were, there are, and there will be. Every story becomes false when it falsifies the holy scriptures. Earth is one of those planets. Even more, the earth was warned many centuries in advance that it would be judged. Centuries after centuries the scriptures were following one another, and as if that were not enough, the divine Father sent prophets at different times. Even his firstborn son offered himself. More written was that a religious rock would emerge, a living arrogance, that it would teach the material worship, causing with it a delay of 20 centuries in the human flock, a delay in the moral and spiritual plane of all generations of the earth. Human spirits did not know material worship, they did not know the so-called prudery, they did not know the false teachings, even they were more modest, they weren't so hypocritical. All these inheritances were weighed against the spirits returning from earthly life, and everyone complains, they learned nothing from the rock. At the contrary, they lost precious seconds, being 1 second a microscopic unit of time. It is great in the kingdom of heaven, and has a valuable weight on the divine addition that the divine Father grants to his children. The rock being a sect that asks to prove philosophy in propagating my divine law, that is why it is the first to be judged. My divine word is the first among the first. They cast the first philosophical stone, in choosing the mission of propagating my divine law, but they lack love and honesty. they should never have allied with materialism, because the rights of my humble must not be blocked, all covenant, all agreement, every alliance that did not take into account my divine commandments, is torn off by the divine rod. To achieve eternity, the supreme mandate must not be violated, one must be or not be at all, every covenant that violates my divine laws judged. I ask the so-called politicians, have you taken into account my divine word as you were told, before creating a so-called political party? Certainly not. My divine word unifies, it unites everything, for all are equal before the Creator. And when I say to you, equal, I want to tell you that divine heavenly communism reigns in heaven. Whoever divides my children on the distant planets, divides himself, for the darkness demands the mistakes made, only Satan divides others and divides himself, he undoes what the divine Father unites. Moreover, Satan is tested out like the rest of the children of the universe. The divine rod was already on earth, Moses had it, who was the same divine spirit of my firstborn son. He asked to be born in the middle of the accursed pharaonic dynasty. He asked for these conditions to rescue the people of Israel. His presence among these demons caused fearfulness. No one in the damned dynasty ever had so many powers. It was the beginning of the fall of a galactic history, a story that began before the birth of Earth, a story that although it developed in the terrestrial world, is not human, for the accursed pharaohs were not of human origin, they were older, they asked to be born as human creatures, to advance the world. More, it was written that they would become arrogant, forgetting their duties as solar hierarchies. They had certain powers over nature, they had it as far as the Divine Father allowed them. These demons knew that their damn days were numbered, they knew from their damn occult sciences that a great solar god would come to judge them, and that is why they hastened the construction of their accursed pyramids. They wanted to leave an eternal memory of their time on the planet, but every accursed pyramid will return to dust. There is no greater monument in human evolution that has not cost so much blood and so much tear. These cursed ones will be judged again. It was written that my divine solar firstborn son Christ would judge the living and the dead. These demons will be called on the near day of all resurrection. The real year 2001 begins the day when all humble ones will be resurrected in new flesh. They will be 12 years old again. This divine revelation had already been announced to the world. My divine solar firstborn son Christ said, "Let the children come to me, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." With that, he wanted to say many things. He wanted to say, because my divine Father is happy as a child. He meant that of all human philosophies, only innocence remains on earth. He meant that from all living psychologies, the divine Father chooses that of a child. He meant to say that returns to earth, what was before, just as human life was, before the invention of money. He meant that, of all human tests, he chooses and prefers children's fantasy, because every child believes, for him everything exists in a beautifully natural way, and a child's psychology is not so far from coming true, for the creation of the Divine Father is so infinite that all fantasy becomes reality. That is why it was also said, a new world will come, where milk and honey will flow, which is so liked by children. This divine prophecy is explained thus, for in eternity more, the seas of the earth will be turned into seas of milk. It will be a divine age in which the heavens will be open, just as it was before the arrival of the accursed pharaohs, just as my divine son turned a river, in ancient Egypt, into blood, so he will turn the oceans from water to milk. It will be an era as men have never imagined. It will no longer be the earth of the past, where they ignored even their own origins. It will no longer be a testing planet, but a paradise one, as it was formerly, as Adam and Eve knew her. The lion will shepherd next to the little lamb. All the children that humanity call animals will be telepathic, and they will be the ones who rule the universe, as always has been, for all humble are great in wisdom in the kingdom of heavens. This humility was never understood by the religious rock. It never glimpsed that the great ones in the kingdom of heaven were on the same earth, and along with them is also my divine firstborn son. It was written, I will dwell among you until the consummation of the centuries. My firstborn son wanted to say, just as you are born again, to advance in knowledge towards my divine Father, so I am also born, as all of you do, nothing more humble and easier than to respect the commands of my divine Father. Therefore, I fulfill births, as you all do. There is nothing exceptional about me, only that I am older than you. I was first among the first, I was earthly, on infinite planets Earth, and none of you were born yet. I lived as long as my divine Father has lived, because what belongs to the Father, belongs to the Son, and what belongs to the Son, belongs to the Father. I lived in colossal suns, because I am like one of them, that is why it was written, and he will come into the world, shining like a sun of wisdom. Your antiquity in the universe brings you closer to the sons, who are also living children as you are, just as above so below, and arrived you above, you will see that everything is the same, more, you will have more power over creation, for the supreme goal of perfection is to emulate the Divine Father, it is to create colossal worlds, with the will of your own mind. Currently your minds are microscopic, you create for small necessities, you do little things, but they are useful for your advancement. In each world of space it is the same. Moreover, there are gigantic worlds, where the mind is not microscopic, according to your sense of proportions. They are creatures that, like you, are from the worlds of the flesh, but they have been the first. They are older in space, they were born in the distant suns, eternities before you were born. They have been born more times on the planets, and whoever is born in greater number, greater is in wisdom, because he has learned more, has lived longer, has seen more, he has more control over the matter that surrounds him, to such an extent of commanding it with his own mind, just as you do small arts with your mind. And as my divine justice is perfect, these colossal creatures were originally like you, they were microscopic, they were just little monkeys of flesh. They were also imperfect, for from imperfection comes out perfection. This means the divine parable that was taught to the world, you have to be small and humble to be great in the kingdom of heaven. Nobody is born perfect, except the Divine Father, that due to his infinite creations, he has no beginning. The only ones who closely follow him are the firstborn children, that they were and are the oldest germs of life after the Father. They know more than any son in the universe, they are given power over all power, the whole universe recognizes them, even matter identifies them, for everything came out of the firstborn sons. This divine revelation is explained thus: what belongs to the Father belongs to the Son, and what belongs to the Son belongs to the Father, and both keeping their free wills. This teaches the world that communism is in the Holy Trinity, it has always been with them, the union and cohesion between matter and spirit have always been so. The divine understanding between Father and Son gives the opportunity to the universes to test infinite relative philosophies, that sooner or later they will end in communism. Divine communism is born of spiritual power, it is born from the spiritual hierarchy, just as from you the virtue is born. In other words, heavenly communism is the product of eternal perfection, it is the maximum expression of a life of struggle and experiences, that it took place, not in a world, not in a single existence, but in infinite worlds, and in countless existences. Therefore, all those spirits who on earth study and advocate for communism are advanced spirits, they want to make a reality on earth what they saw in other worlds, for all doctrine expands from world to world, knowledge is above all things, expansive, and all doctrine costs struggle. Nothing is easy in the imperfect worlds, everything costs, even in the perfect worlds, but those are laws that you have not yet lived, but you are going to live them. The Divine Father sees the future, before its actors are born, therefore the so-called communism is of galactic origin. Like all doctrine, nothing is created on earth, as many believe it. What is invented on earth has already been invented on other worlds. What happens is that the human mind is revealed, unconsciously. It is a revelation, a close relative of inspiration. The ideas sprout in one present, but they have occurred in other presents in the past of the spirit. They are born again to life, as the spirit itself is born. To be born is to remember, and to remember is to fulfill a mandate. All ideas have free will and individuality, some different from the others. They chose as a destination to unite with a certain spirit, that they call Spirit Sun, for they are so microscopic that they see the human spirit as an immense sun. Just as you see astonished the colossal suns of space, so ideas see you, just as above, so below. And the above was like as below, it was tiny and microscopic. That is why it was said, the truth is in yourselves, for you have, within you, the microscopic ideas, that traveling into space, they sprout like seed sprouts, and from which the future planets are born. The set of ideas that travel into space is known as a galactic seed. That is why it was written, Each one makes his own heaven, for each planet carries its own magnetic envelope. There is no world without its own heaven. Inheritance is the same for everyone, according to the quality of the moral of each one, so will be the philosophy of each world that by its ideas, are born in space. If the creature was worldly and immoral, be sure that its inheritance in space is the same. All the creatures of the future world will be worldly and immoral, and the author of that world will have to go in the eternity of time to bring advance that world. He will have to go and give them the light of a new knowledge. And if the creature cultivated love during its life, be sure that its future worlds will be sublime paradises, and that world will not need to be redeemed. Here it is understood that only humility gives perfection. That is why all sacred scripture teaches that above all things, one must be humble. It was so that each one created only paradises, and not to create hells. This is the supreme spiritual test of mankind. It is the supreme one among the tests. The forgetfulness of the past also includes his ideas. There is no idea that is not tested. How the spirit is tested. The test of human life is so fair and perfect that it affects each one's eternity, it affects one's future creations, it affects the future worlds, and it has repercussions in the kingdom of heavens. Everything has repercussions in the living universe of Father Jehovah. Everything has an impact on the everything above everything. Nobody is out of it, even the Divine Father is in it. The whole universe moves, creating and multiplying in an expansive way. To the extent that creatures think, the more you think, the more you create, more universes are born, more galactic seeds travel into space. And already formed a world, the creatures of that world also think, and they also create new worlds, and thus follows the eternal succession of ideas and worlds. Its number nobody will ever be able to calculate it, only the Divine Father knows it, and he has known it for a long time before, that worlds were just microscopic ideas. Even more, he knows it before the material universe was born. He has always known it. In the midst of a swarm of worlds and suns, there is the Divine Father, attending to a colossal world, as well as a microscopic microbe. The small and the big one have the same importance. Nobody is less before the Father, for everything came out of him, and everything goes towards him. We are all a product of his living love. The trying to understand the Father brings about being born again on the planets, and whoever is not born again does not know the Father. Whoever stops his evolution stops his own light. The entire manifested universe moves within its relative laws. There is relativity in the matter and relativity in spirit, and the relativity is at the same time relative. It has free will, and every free will has determinations. Yes, dear son, so it is, just as you think. The divine measuring rod in explaining the origins of the universe constitutes the most perfect justice within injustice. All justice comes from the kingdom of heavens, and all injustice comes from men. It is a consequence of their spiritual imperfection. If men were more perfect, rest assured that earth would be a lesser paradise. Money would not be known, this demon would not be known, that divides my flock into rich and poor. Ambition would not be known, everything would belong to everyone. But it was enough that a group of ambitious demons came to earth, and the yoke began for the world, a yoke that takes many centuries. Very little time is left. Very soon these demons will be reading to me, and they will be terrified. They will see that all evil has its time of trial. There is no evil that does not receive his justice. They fertilize the way to receive what they will receive. Never some creatures will be so despised, as all ambitious will be despised. No one ever lived so isolated as these demons will live. No one was ever looked at with so much compassion as these executioners of the world will be looked at. Yes, dear son, these things will occur when the doctrine of the Lamb of God spreads. What human sees around you? How small will be left the multitudes that mortals gathered on earth ever? So it will be when the world knows you, and they will know you by the fruit. They will know you by your doctrine, just as men are defined by their thoughts. The divine measuring rod will cause the fall of materialism. All falsehood will be undermined at its foundations. All falsehood cannot resist the changes that have arisen from eternity. All falsehood is what deviated from my divine commandments. It is what grew up in the midst of a world that suffered. It is that which forgot that first there is the Father. The divine commandments were given to the world to be fulfilled. The world was warned. Let no one be surprised. They will blame each other, they will curse against each other, amidst the weeping and gnashing of teeth. How 1 second of time will be longed for, lived in humility. How the humble and the exploited ones will be envied. Only then will humanity understand why one had to be humble after so many centuries. This immense delay in understanding it is due exclusively to the rock, which will be called the Vatican sect. It is the one that produced the greatest spiritual backwardness in my children. It laid upon itself a material power, similar to the power of the beast, to the power of materialism. To fight the devil, you don't have to imitate him, the opposite must be demonstrated. All imitation ends up violating its own sincerity. This is what happened to the so-called Catholic Church. It advocated defending my divine word, but it did it with cruelty and giving immoral examples. It did it forming a true empire, because it even has its own bank. It formed one more state, thereby contributing to the largest division in the world. And when the Divine Father sent messengers to make them see their error, they persecuted them. This rock also made that all the doors were closed for these children in life. A taste of their own medicine the rock will be given. They will be despised. The Divine Father cannot reward those who do despise. Cultivating faith was taught, and the conviction. More, these demons are the least in believing. They only believe what their own egoism dictates them. They never accepted opposing positions, and everyone who dared to do so, they persecuted them. They applied the false law of excommunication to them. They were ruthless. That is why my divine Son said centuries ago, "On this rock I will build my church." He meant, on this spiritual rock, upon this spiritual selfishness. For my divine firstborn Son was able to see into the future. When he said these words, he was seeing the future generations of the earth. He saw the future transgressions from men. He saw how the religious rock persecuted the envoys of the Father. He saw the crimes of the damned Inquisition. He saw how the divine law was traded. He saw how armaments were blessed, with which the children of the Father are killed. He saw the false alliances of the rock. He saw how they crowned false kings. He saw how they imitated materialism. He saw everything. He saw how the rock filled the world with luxurious temples. He saw material worship spreading throughout the human race, which leads to nothing, for the creature does not advance, it stops in contemplation. My divine Son encompassed everything, with a single glance at the future of the earth, and he understood that even though divine law was going to be violated, he should give them a chance. He recalled the divine parable of the Father. Every spirit is tried in its intentions, every thinking being is tested out at every moment in life, from birth to the last breath of life. Therefore, the members of the religious rock are judged the same as the rest, even more, they are judged more severely, because the fault committed is superior to the other faults committed by humanity. They have to pay the debtor to which they led past generations. All complaint about the delay, this delay in my children is due to the fact that the rock did not faithfully comply with what was proposed. The sacred writings were created to form with them a patriarchal government, a government common to all. My divine laws do not divide anyone, they were made to unify, and not to divide. My divine laws represent the same philosophy of the kingdom of heaven, in infinite relative proportion. The divine rod is a microscopic part of the justice that reigns in the kingdom of heaven, and being microscopic it is perfect, because it gives continuity to human living. It prevents humanity from being enslaved by the ambitious. The ambitious should look to the fate of the empires of the past. None remained, and all its actors still curse the destiny they created, for they left ambitious inheritance on earth. All human domains disappear beside the living eternity. They all curse having been close-minded during life, in a philosophy that disappears beside eternity, and the human spirit is saddened more when it realizes that it is just a stranger in the worlds of eternity, in the macrocosm, called the kingdom of heaven. The divine measuring rod gives and takes away. In other words, the divine commandments have been observing through the centuries, the performance of each human creature. They are the living word of God, which is everywhere. When saying living, it means that it is in the same human idea, because every idea is born of living beings, and it means that the mere presence of the Creator is enough to give and take away life, when his divine free will considers it so. The divine rod will bring justice to the world. Everything will be restored. To the one who that was unjustly taken away, it will be returned to him. He who starved will be satisfied. To the one who was robbed, it will be returned. Whoever has excess for usury, will be taken away. To those who were run over in their rights, everything will be restored. And in the latter, there are the humble of the planet. They are millions and millions. they are the chosen ones for the New World. Everyone who sweated and suffered the yoke of exploitation is first in the kingdom of heaven. All those who acted as executioners will never enter the kingdom of heaven. All of them will not wear the little silver lamb, and if they wear it, they will carry it as a principle of repentance. The world will know them. The so-called nobles of the earth will not wear the divine silver lamb either, nor will they be resurrected to children in the real year 2001. No one forced them to be false kings. They had enough time to renounce the demon, for with that philosophy of pride, they have only served the spirit king. It was written that they have already obtained their reward. They placed themselves ahead of divine justice. Everyone in the world will cry, because there is no human creature that has not violated the divine mandate, and all the anger will be directed to the rock of human egoism, for all faith was tested out, and all will suffer a shock in their own beliefs, which will be translated into feeling. They trusted blindly in the rock. It was written, do not believe every spirit, rather, find out from the sacred scriptures if the spirits that teach are from God. Did you never realize, children of faith, that the Divine Father does not make weapons to kill? He creates, does not destroy. If you had been true prophets of my word, the philosophy of the rock would not have surprised you. I mean, if you had studied me as you were commanded, weren't you taught to worship God above all else? This worship is not as you were taught. I do not ask for temples or images. The only temple that lasts for all eternity is work. There is no other, and if there is one, be sure that that temple will turn to dust. And the other truth is that you should have studied me in your free hours, lifelong. Am I not, in fact, your creator? Do you not breathe by my divine power? Why have you denied me? Why did you prefer philosophies and readings that will never give you eternity? It is too late, my children. You only have the way of repentance, for I will tell you that the score that corresponds the Divine Father's sake is the highest among all the others. For each virtue that you put into action during your life, there is one score per second lived, and if you had studied me as you were commanded, you would have no final judgment. This is spiritually and individually, because some read me, they are very few. Others don't study me. It was written that it takes all sorts to make a world. The Divine Father only asks for what corresponds to him. I demand what I myself created, for the Divine Father created everything, and I tell you earthly children, none who has not studied me as. The Divine Commandment says, none will enter the kingdom of heaven. You will follow the same fate as the false prophets, the very fate of the rock of human egoism. So it is, so it will be forever and ever. I am the jealous Father Jehovah of armies. I am, who I am. I give life and I take away life. I give life and demand morals, as required by a Father on earth, as above, so below. There is no time that is not fulfilled, nor justice that sooner or later does not arrive. You chose, you had free will, take over what you have reaped, because it was written that each one is judged according to his works. You have an eternity to repent. But I repeat, no false enters my dwelling. They have never entered eternity, as no one rich has ever entered. The Divine Rod explains the following: anyone who goes beyond the middle center is a violator of my law. The middle center is 5. Everyone who, having an excessive abundance, must renounce the excess. He must not go beyond the middle center of his own measuring rod. Exceeding 5 is trying to dominate others. They will not be resurrected into children in 2001, new time. Everyone carries the Divine Rod in their consciences, and all conscience will be read by my firstborn son, which is already among you. Do not fall again. Remember that it is final judgment. Even if you deceive again, you will not pass. The Divine Rod will explain everything to you, although that everything is in your own consciences. You need to know what was made unseen to you, due to the forgetfulness of the past, that you voluntarily asked in the kingdom of heaven. Nobody was forced to come, except for those who had outstanding spiritual debts, although not all, for many volunteered to pay their debts, and everything is granted. Everything you see in life, everything was requested. Before you left the kingdom of heaven, you saw on colossal solar television screens, everything that happened to you, is happening to you, and will happen to you. This is called in the kingdom of heaven, divine verb, word, which means, truth in divine trial. The divine verb has been misinterpreted by students of my word. This is because men are also tested, in knowledge, by not giving me prime importance in their actions in their own lives. Men made the very reality of the final judgment more painful. The divine judgment is nothing tenebrous, you only get what you deserve. To interpret my divine judgment as something dark is to confuse myself with Satan, whose story humanity knows very little. Only now will you know, for all of you are with a momentary forgetfulness of your pasts. It will be given to all to see the Creator, in the same proportion as you were interested in me in life. Those who do not see me, it is because they are violators of my law. Nobody can say that they did not have some source, where they could learn to know the will of the Creator, the divine Creator of your lives, and of everything that exists. I allowed the world to spread my sacred scriptures to all nations. I allowed them to be translated into all languages, even in regions where other gods were worshipped, whose cause is in human intuition, vague memory of what was seen in the kingdom of heaven. Everywhere I allowed there to be speakers of my word, that although they spoke in the name of the so-called religions, it was the Father they alluded to, and the Father is moved, and the Father says to you, yes, dear children, for my sake, you were mocked, for my sake, they persecuted you, you asked in the kingdom of heaven, to propagate what you saw up above, and it was granted to you in your destinies. More, you were guided by the religious rock, you were victims of these blind guides of the blind, that being in error, they transmitted the error to you. Because of these arrogant, such a parable was written. In the spiritual world the bustle and the claim still resounds, because of the unjust delay that this rock caused in the spirits of the past. Nothing of humility, all was hypocrisy, they only made of my spirits worldly children, who lived under the illusion of passing things, ephemeral things, which are worthless in the kingdom of heaven. And keep in mind, demons of the rock, you will have to pay for the misfortunes of those who have already gone. There is no debt that is not paid, either above or below. You demons of selfishness, you ask to be judged for your mistakes, on earth itself. That is why the divine rod mentions you first. You are the worst yoke that all living faith finds. You always treat as crazy ones those who bring you a divine revelation. You always doubt my humble ones. You always hide all writing that my envoys try to put within your reach. Years after years pass, and you do not give the good news of the Lord to the flock. You dress in gold and hypocrisy. You are neat on the outside, and corrupted inside. For you demons, the divine parable of the clean outside and dirty inside cup was written. You call yourselves representatives of God on earth, and you let the cursed wars kill my innocent children. Why you, demon ones, don't you made an official reprimand to the creators of wars? I'll tell you why. You don't have the moral strength to impose yourself. Why do you bless the damn weapons? Don't you know, cursed ones, that my divine commandment says, do not kill? You certainly know that. More, your arrogance to believe that you know everything makes you blind. You should never have been corrupted by the illusion that money creates, the science of good and evil, which are the comforts that money gives, tempted you. You should never have recognized the nations that created money. My divine Son gave his life for his divine cause, and you false prophets, why don't you give it? You have set out to proclaim to the world that you are my representatives. The divine Father is God of the humbles, not for the hypocrites. You have formed before the world a false morality, and the world believes you. You will pay until the last second of deceit caused to each one of my children, of those who are in the spiritual world, and of those who are still in the trial of life. And I assure you that no demon of falsehood will escape. It is said in many worlds that you do the crime, you do the time. You will know that it was written that you would be the first to be judged, and you said nothing of this to the world, because it did not suit to your petty earthly interests. I will give you a light of my wisdom, the divine parable that says, he who has ears let him hear, he who has eyes, let him see, whoever has a mouth, let him speak. This divine parable means that every revelation of the divine Father must be made known. The good news of the Lord is for all humble in heart. Nothing that belongs to the Father must be hidden from the world. Whoever hides a truth from my humble ones, hides it from me. It was written that God is everywhere, it is also in every mind deceived, and whoever does it, is accused in the kingdom of heaven, of intellectual selfishness. All who were called by letters, invited to see, are in this law of justice. My humble Son knocked many hearts, and found only selfishness and contempt. Many were called and few were chosen. The world will know them, crying and gnashing of teeth this will provoke them. It's called both above and below, they are all my children. More, if the Son despises the Father, he only receives what he should receive, and whoever despises the Son who is on a mission, despises the Father. and whoever despises the Father, despises his own eternity. It was written, what belongs to the Son, belongs to the Father, and what belongs to the Father belongs to the Son. This means that God being everywhere, he is also in the moral pain caused to the Son, and if there is physical pain, the Father is also in it. All those called, despised a reward pending from their spiritual past. On other worlds they did the same, they also despised me. They asked for an opportunity, in the kingdom of heaven, and it was granted to them. They have free will, all called saw my light, and it is enough to see my light, so that every child is unconditionally placed at the orders of his own Creator. Was it not taught to every earthly being? You shall worship the Lord your God above all things. Why did they despise me then? Let them, confusion and tears they will have, nobody forced them. The divine rod will explain to the world how everyone will be judged, without any exception, starting from the universal base that one came into the world, to learn, to perfect their own living virtues. The living virtues form a whole, which is called human character. It is the way of thinking and feeling of each one. It is consciousness made destiny. The virtues add up to 318 in current human evolution. Each virtue possesses free will, separately, therefore, they add up to 318 free wills. The human spirit also possesses free will. It is also independent. The spirit, since it is born, knows nothing of this, for it was not given to him to know. It fulfills a test destination. With a momentary forgetfulness of his past, the hour of divine judgment arrived, and it will be explained to him, even the most microscopic fiber of his own being, reaching even to penetrate the composition of his invisible ideas. The Creator of life explains it by divine telepathy, which is one of the infinite means of making himself known in the worlds. So it has always been. This is how my firstborn son received all his wisdom. You know well that he did not attend any school. He had no earthly instruction. Everything was given to him by telepathy. His school was the same universe. He was conversing with the molecules of matter. He was entering and leaving the kingdom of heaven. He was making the future a present, and turning past into the present. He was commanding all dimensions. He was seeing what happening on other worlds. He was seeing everything. His divine power was embodied in himself. He only waited for a birth, an incarnation, one more birth. His divine hierarchy was and is of the solar Father. Human race must not forget what was written, and it will return bright like a sun of wisdom. This divine parable announced that he was a solar sun, one who came from the Alpha Sun, and was begotten by the Omega Sun. This divine revelation shows that the divine solar Trinity possess infinite sexes. For there is no sex that doesn't have its Trinity. Trinity and sex are the same thing, manifested in a living flesh, just as above, so below. In its principles, in its origins, the sexes were requested in the kingdom of heaven. Sex has free will, just like the spirit and the virtues, for those male or female who have changed their divine sex. Poor all of those who make scandals with their bodies. With this they scandalize sex, until the last scandalized little pore will have to be paid. Each little pore, each cell of flesh has free will, one independent of the other. To show the naked body is to be accused in the kingdom of heaven by trillions and trillions of living little pores. It's not for nothing that it was written that every little one and every humble one are the first in the kingdom of heaven, and the divine Father adds, all microscopic, whether in the matter or in spirit, for everywhere there is life, everything is transformed in my living creation. Whoever doubts it, goes to worlds whose philosophy is eternal doubt. Continuing the divine law of the microscopic, I will tell you that every scandalous in fashion also pays for it, molecule by molecule. All those long-haired and immoral people will have to pay hair for hair, which they scandalously showed the world, ridiculing the philosophy of these sons, who asked to accompany the spirit in life. They did it in divine alliances. They did it for the purpose of advancing in morality, and not in immorality. One is born to learn both in the matter and in spirit. Many demons of ignorance and scandal believe that because in ancient times people wear long hair, they must necessarily do the same. Gross ignorance. Those who think like this are worldly spirits, backward spirits, who stop wasting their time in a vanity, immoral vanity that tramples one's own sex. Either you are a man or you are a woman. You are born a man or you are born a woman. You, scandalous demons, should never have grown your hair, to the degree of causing gossip to the world. The least degree of gossip is already the least degree of scandal. And I tell you, demons of vanity, you will have to add up all the seconds that have elapsed since you started to scandalize with your hair. Moreover, the accusations made by your hair for hair, for each one possesses free will, and being little ones, the Divine Father listens to them first. After listening to everything microscopic that your body possesses, the human spirit is listened to last, as it was taught, last shall be first, and those who believe themselves to be the first are the last. This way is divine justice in the kingdom of heaven. All abundance enjoyed on earth is worth nothing in the kingdom of heaven, because it is a prize already enjoyed in the distant planet. Only the action and intention of the spirit count, only conscience counts, since every mandate is for the conscience, mindless to the interests of human intelligence, but at the same time, intelligence is also judged, for from the Creator it came out. The time has come when you will curse your vanities, your illusions, because taken together, they will give you a terrifying sum of scores against, which will have to be removed from your own edition, that the Creator had you reserved, provided that you had fulfilled even the most microscopic part of the divine commandments, because I will tell you that in them is the greatest moral power, the living morality of the Divine Father, with the only one that you could enter all the heavens of infinity, even to penetrate the colossal and distant suns, just as this humble sun penetrates, that everything he sees, he communicates to all of you, because all experience must be made known, there is no reason to hide it. Writing by the Alpha and the Omega.